Hello, welcome to CarCast+Edmunds podcast. I'm Matt, the moderator, Deandra, here with Alistair Weaver. How you doing?
I'm very good. Thanks, Matt.
We're
Very good
starting to
indeed.
get some news. We're starting to get some car news. It seemed a little slow for a minute, and now things are starting to leak out about future models. So, um, yeah, there's some. I kind of feel like maybe leading up to Car Week as well in Monterey, we're going to start to get more. The next couple of months, I think we're going to start to get more information, right?
Sounds good. Yeah, a few launches at Goodwood in the UK, then off to Car Week. These are the new auto shows. This is where it's all happening, and yeah, quite a lot of exciting stuff coming out.
Before we get started, let me tell you guys about Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season, from baseball and golf to soccer and all the top fights at UFC and MMA and boxing. They have every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the games are over, head on over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with over 150 different slot games. Head to the website to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for 50% off your welcome bonus off your first deposit. It's BLEAV for 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, the game starts here. Okay, so let's get into this first. What have you been driving around? I understand you guys finally took delivery of this vehicle you've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, so finally we put the order in on the unveil night of the Cybertruck. Was that 4 years ago now? Three
It
years ago?
seems like
four
it,
years
yeah.
ago? Years ago. It was the famous night when I was stood, I don't know, a few yards from Elon when they threw
The
the ball
metal ball.
bearings at the window
Yeah.
and the window broke and nobody quite knew what the hell was going on. Anyway, we put down $100 or whatever it was back then, and finally last week it turned up. So we ran it around the office 2 days, then I took it home for the weekend to live with it in the real world. It's parked outside my house. It's sort of like 20 feet in that direction. It obviously won't fit in the garage, so that's challenge number one.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
we've got the foundation dual motor. So this is like obviously one of the early ones, but the foundation. So basically, it's the dual motor version with not the tri motor. We talked about getting the tri motor, but frankly, we didn't want to spend more than 100 grand, so we spent 102 grand in total. So this is 80 grand, and then there's an extra 20 grand for the foundation series, which includes things like full self-driving capacity and a few other little options. But obviously, it's a way of Tesla making some additional money on the early models. It's it's a thing. Like the
It's
one,
a thing.
it's a thing. Like the one thing I would say about it is, I'm not a celebrity, but this is as close as you can get. And I wondered, I drove the test car a few weeks ago, and I wondered, like, now a few weeks on, I went past Marina Del Rey here in LA. There were 30 Cybertrucks or so waiting for delivery. So they're not such an unusual sight now, but it still just instantly provokes opinion. And I was talking
Yeah.
to somebody in the office, and he said he'd had it before me. And he said after a few days, his daughter wanted a sign that she could just hold up that said, this is not actually my car." And I feel a little bit the same because everywhere you go, there's this kind of pantomime around it. And some of that is because it looks so odd. Some of it's just because it's so bloody big. I was driving it up near my house, and like somebody had to maneuver out of the way so I could get this thing through. And when you're making such an ostentatious statement anyway, and then you're trying to maneuver this thing around, and you just have to accept that there is a lot of, you could call it theatre, you could also call it circus that comes with it. And I'm fairly extrovert, but I'm only extrovert when it's something that I kind of feel is me. And I just don't feel like a Cybertruck is me. I feel like it's somebody trying to make a statement rather than somebody just naturally feeling comfortable. This
It's
thing is huge. The rear haunches are as wide as a Raptor. So in LA, it feels really big. Even outside of LA, even if you get outside, it's still a big thing to move around. And it's got four-wheel steering and it's got drive-by-wire steering. So little steering inputs make a big difference. So it takes some getting used to. So there's just a lot to take in. You just got to be comfortable with the fact that I am making this big statement, and I either love that about it and like lean into it, or just say, I don't care.
I mean, it's roomy on the inside, but It is big overall. It's a little awkward to drive. You get a lot of attention for sure. But I don't know. The thought of going back to the original announcement, going, it's $40,000 truck. It's going to be the new work truck. Of course, we'll be able to scale up from there. Like every other truck company will get you $100,000 version. Sure, it didn't meet the price point mark, but also it's not a work truck.
So,
It just doesn't have nearly the creative features that the big companies have been doing with, bed storage and steps and multi-opening tailgates and just all of the things that over time and experience the truck manufacturers have learned how to do. This doesn't have any of that.
so I go for. I mean, to play devil's advocate for a minute, like the bed size is good. You know,
Yeah.
it's pretty much 6x4. Yeah, it's got a little slope on the front, but the bed. If you watch our video where we compared it with the F-150 Lightning and the Rivian, actually, like the bed's pretty good. The front trunk is a little bit small, but it's still
Yeah.
useful if you kind of like throwing, you want to put lock some tools away or like the weekly shop or whatever. So some of the basic foundations of truck, it can carry stuff. The air suspension goes up and down, so it can get you places. But it comes back for me. It's a bit more than that. It comes back to the image thing again. I was with our president of the company, and he said, "You couldn't turn like I completely agree with him. Could you turn up as a contractor in LA in a Cybertruck? Like if your plumber turns up in a Cybertruck,
Yeah.
there's just something. Even though you well know that you can spend 100 grand on an F-150 Lightning
Yeah.
because you've done it, but." There's something about turn up in an F-150 Lightning. People say, "Oh, great! There's a Ford truck with electric. That's great. Happy planet." If you turn up in a Cybertruck, you just look so kind of rich and ostentatious, even if it's the same money. That I just don't. You've either got to be like maybe if you're doing like high-end audio or something, you can get away with it. But like if my plumber or like or a gardener or somebody turned up in a Cybertruck, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
You know,
there's just something about the vibe it gives off.
I was talking to Goldberg on the podcast a little while ago, and uh, he went out to, I don't know, Nashville or something, and got together with a handful of guys to do a drag race, with Kenny Wayne Shepherd and Kid Rock and a couple of guys, and drag racing Dodge Demons in his twin turbo car, and uh, Kid Rock showed up in his Cybertruck. So if you think yours gets attention, Kid Rock has his Cybertruck wrapped like the Dukes
Oh,
of
that's
Hazzard
cool.
General
The Dukes
Lee.
of Hazzard, yeah.
And he actually showed up someplace like at a rodeo or something, and he was like an act there, so he sang from the back. But when I talked to Goldberg, he's like, no, he drives it. This is parked in front of his house, like in his big driveway at his house, his General Lee Cybertruck. So I don't know, just one of the different ways. Like I'm starting to see wraps on these things pop up all the time. There's a bright green, like a lime green one running around in the neighborhood. So if you think the stainless steel version gets attention, you can get a lot more
It,
attention with it
it,
now.
well, I was up in Malibu on a Sunday morning, and Franz, the chief designer of Tesla, I don't pronounce his surname properly, but Franz von Hausen or whatever, for about a hot second, forget it. His matte black one was outside, and I recognize it's got some of the accessories on it, and he was just shopping it. And I've met him a few times, but I didn't want to bother him I didn't want to do that. Hey, how are you on a Sunday morning?
Yeah.
But yeah, everywhere you go, it's to say maybe we should wrap ours because one of the challenges that straight away we're finding is, it's stainless steel. And if
Yeah.
you've got a stainless steel fridge or you've got a stainless steel, cooker or whatever, it marks up.
Yeah.
And, when you've got kids and they put sun cream on their little paws and then they touch the truck, like there's a big mark on it. And I know there is like on a painted car, but it's just so much more obvious. Anyway, Sunday morning, I had some friends over for breakfast. And then we went outside and somebody had run their finger entirely down the end of the whole line of the car. So there's now like a smear all the way down that thing.
Yeah.
And then somebody else described, I'm trying to think of the appropriate way of putting this, but basically a piece of male biology that would be distinctive to a man on the rear of the car. And then I was like, how the hell do I get this off? So I actually, and I've got one of those Ring cameras on the front of the house, but the battery was dead. Otherwise, I've had a really nice video of somebody drawing this
Appendage.
appendage on the rear of the car.
Just
and
like
I
with a
spent
finger, though, right? They
with a
weren't
finger.
like out there
Yeah.
with a Sharpie or something.
No, no, with a finger, but a finger on stainless steel. So, like, if you were to draw a similar thing on your fridge at home, it
Yeah,
takes some getting off, right?
yeah, yeah.
So, but then it was like, then my wife said, well, just get some like cleaner, like multi-surface cleaner. I was like, I don't know, I can use that on stainless steel. It's like, let's get the stainless steel cleaner out. And I was like, can I do that on the Tesla? It's like, is it literally the same as my fridge?
Right now, you
So
have
in
to
the end, I
like
was like scrubbing this thing off for about 20 minutes. If
you
I
have to
had the
go
cap,
back and Google how to clean it, right? So you don't get it wrong, so you don't
just
void
there's
the
a guy around the
warranty or
corner from
something.
me owns one, and he was out when there was like, like the drills with a little buffing thing on it.
Yeah.
He was like doing his with that. So we got to, there's lots of things we've got to,
But you might end up polishing some of it. You might go too
yeah.
far and end
Yeah,
up
and then you
polishing
lose
it.
that matte stainless steel. So anyway, after much scrubbing, I have removed said said item from the car, and I've charged my camera up. So anybody else who comes and does that is going to get caught, and we can share it on social. But like, look,
Let's
I
wrap
put
it.
the
Let's wrap it with Bravago. We'll put a big hard seltzer
oh,
wrap on it for you.
see what you did there. Any
Yeah.
excuse?
Well, everybody's looking at the truck anyway. This is a genius way to promote a brand, a
Yeah,
young
we could have
brand
a
like
good.
ours.
Yeah, I'm with you. We can have Edmunds CarCast. There
Yeah,
you go.
put Edmunds CarCast on there as well, presented
And
by
I'm gonna
Bravo,
feel
of course.
even more self-conscious. There was a Cars and Coffee down the road, quite a big one in Redondo Beach on Sunday morning, and a couple of the guys in the neighborhood was, oh, bring it down. I was just like, I go up Sunday morning, I just said, I don't want to like, I just can't be bothered to like, to go through all the fanfare of it and answer a billion questions, which, maybe I was just
Yeah.
being miserable.
There's definitely a lot of discussion, a lot of debate around it. There's a lot of love and hate. Not a lot of middle ground, I don't think, but there's a lot of love and hate for it. So,
I think the
um,
thing that we're going to try and get into with
yeah,
living with it, and my wife said this as well, and we put the kids in the back, and they love it because there's a telly. That's all they care about. There's one of those TVs like in the center of the car, like you get in a Model 3. So that's
yeah,
all they care about. Can they watch Peppa Pig? And then the rest, my wife was like, well, actually, once you get past the nonsense and the fact that you're making such a scene, it's actually a big, comfortable truck.
right. You
It's
tint
very
the windows
quiet.
in
It
it, you go on
drives
a road
well.
trip.
It's fast. It's actually quite a nice way to travel. The stereo works really well. The range is pretty good. It's fast enough. Even the dual motor is more than fast enough. The ride's good. It feels more solid than because it's not ladder frame. It feels more kind of secure, solid than a F-150. So once you get past all the nonsense, then actually it's a good vehicle. Tesla know what they're doing. They've got good engineers. It's really well built now, which, early Teslas most definitely weren't. So I think that's what we're going to enjoy, like over the next few months, is once you get past all the nonsense and all the kind of statement bit,
Yeah.
like how does it work as a vehicle? And,
So you guys have already
that's what.
done a range test on one because you guys got your hands on one just to do a range test, not the full gamut of tests, but you did a range test. So now I'm curious, now that you guys own it, I'd love to see you guys swap out the tires, take off the off-road tires, put on a more conventional all-season highway or EV tire and do the range test and see what the difference is. Because you guys are essentially comparing apples to apples because your range test is the same every time.
That's right. And yeah, and there was also issues I think in the early stage with the even the hub covers for the wheels.
Yeah.
So there are lots of little factors that impact on range, but yeah, putting different tires on it, I think will make a significant difference. We actually had I'm just looking. I remember we actually had a technical challenge with the thing. So we're going to run a whole gamut of testing. It's going down the test track. It's going to run all the braking, all the lateral grip. Going to redo the range test, the efficiency test,
Yeah.
charging test, and then put all that together and see how it evolves over time, and then play around with the wheels and everything else that goes with the full ownership experience. But we spent 100 grand on this thing, so we're gonna get our money's worth, and I'm glad we've got it. We talk about it, and I don't like some of the nonsense that comes with it, but I like cars that are different, and I'm glad it exists. It makes the world a more interesting place. It really does.
So turning the page a little bit, the latest news on Fisker. Fisker obviously was struggling. Fisker's been looking for some help, some sort of partner from a big car company to kind of bail them out financially. And it seems like they weren't able to make a deal like that happen. And I know there was like rumors of Fisker management going, "Oh, we've got some offers, but none of them are good enough." I'm like, I'm not sure what that means, because if the next option is bankruptcy, then isn't any offer essentially better? But I'm not sure. It depends on what they thought the assets were worth.
Yeah, I mean,
So
this is going in straight into chapter 11, isn't it? It's
yeah.
I mean,
So
it's
there,
not a great surprise to anybody, and I know there's a lot of I mean, part of me is quite sad because I've been a bit of an apologist for the Fisker, not for all like, I mean, the company's made mistakes and everything else, but I've always said like we own one as Edmunds, and fundamentally, there's a good car waiting to get out. It's well built because it's built by people who know how to build cars. It was just launched too early, and if you'd had another year, if you'd had the money to sustain another year of development, then you could have actually popped out with a pretty decent car. And so, could somebody have come in and like effectively finished it? Well, yes, but like who is realistically going to do that? And then there's all sorts of questions around who owns what IP and intellectual property. So it's never quite as straightforward as somebody coming along and say, oh, we'll just take it and, finish it off. And there's also a lot around that car. There's probably nothing on that car that you would look at and say this is absolutely proprietary. Like if you look at Lucid, for example, if the Saudis decided we're not keeping pumping money in and we're going to effectively let it go down, I think there's a lot of clever stuff in the Lucid, and we've seen this with the deal with Aston Martin and potentially others. There's quite a lot of clever stuff that that's doing that I think actually would be of interest to others to effectively pick among the bones.
yes, and they're
I don't think that's true of
manufacturing.
Fisker.
They have facilities to manufacture their own cars, so there's more assets arguably for that company than
Uh,
Fisker.
yeah, and
Fisker's IP
that
is
was the flip side of the Fisker argument, wasn't it? Actually, if we don't manufacture it ourselves, then we're not pumping loads of money into massive overhead. That we actually, if we start off with somebody else building it, we can kind of manage things a little bit better and end up with a product that's pretty well built. And that's to some extent what they've done. The problem with the Fisker is actually less to do with the build and the hardware than the software, and it just wasn't finished.
yeah.
Neither was Lucid when they launched it, but Lucid had enough backing and enough time to get it sorted, whereas Fisker sadly never will.
If you think about the differences between some of these car companies, these young new car companies like Fisker and the older brands, the Dodges, Mercedes of the world, when when the big three were getting bailed out years ago, uh, and Ford decided to leverage its assets instead of take government money, Ford was able to basically leverage their logo.
Yeah, they
For
sold they mortgaged the brand, didn't they? Alan
they
Mullally, who was a CEO, came from Boeing, I think, and
Yeah,
that he was.
they
Yeah,
basically mortgaged the logo, and because there's huge licensing money, the value of the Ford logo is massive compared to the entire Fisker, right? Like just the logo alone was worth way more money. And I'm sure there was an actual number on it, but it was probably hundreds of millions of dollars.
yeah, or billions. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
it's.
Just on that part of the brand. And it's funny. I wonder if they fully bought it back or are they still making payments on it.
I've no idea. They probably wouldn't tell us if we
They
asked, but
probably wouldn't tell us,
yeah,
but
I mean
they
that's the
probably got it
problem.
back.
That's the problem with Fisker, right? It's very sad for the 1,000 people that they did employ, but there's six. I think they sold like 6,500 cars, including
Yeah.
one of them to us, and I don't think anybody's going to shed a tear over it if he's just not big enough. The whole too big to fail thing was certainly true of Ford and GM. There won't be too many tears shed over the 6,000 people who've bought them, who are probably seen as, at least seen as, whether this is true or not. They will be perceived to be wealthy early adopters. And then there was an office in Manhattan Beach with a few hundred people there, and again it's
Yeah.
it's just nobody's really going to care in the end. There's hopefully people will get paid out who owed money, and that'll be that. And we now are left with a vehicle that who knows realistic what happened. There's actually a couple of at the same time they're announcing bankruptcy, they're actually announcing a couple of recalls. Now, the recalls are fixable by over-the-air updates, and I believe there's all sorts of consumer legislation that's designed to protect people, going forwards. But even that's a bit of a grey area. There's features of the car that don't work. If there's
Yeah.
who's going to actually do the programming that's needed to sustain various elements of it, or if there's more recalls, it's a mess. And unfortunately, we're a company, so I wouldn't say it's a different thing. It's still money, but it's not like a private individual who's gone out and spent $60,000 of hard-earned cash and is now sitting on an asset that is, arguably worthless and might not work too well going forwards.
Yeah. How long before a YouTuber tries to LS swap one of these things? Start cutting it up and see if they could shove a V8 in there and a more traditional drive train. It's gonna be
Yeah,
tough.
maybe.
It's gonna be tough.
I mean, if you could just put Apple CarPlay in it and a couple of other things, you might be okay.
Yeah, yeah, but you're right. Like it, there's probably something you can do if you were going to turn it into a gas engine vehicle. I would probably the way to do it would probably be to have a chassis made, try to move the body and the interior all onto a custom chassis and completely wire it from scratch. Get a fresh
Yeah.
like hot rod harness and wire it from scratch. And everything from power windows to headlights and whatever is not relying on any of the Fisker software or it just do it all from scratch, conventional switches. And you're right. And then end up just putting some aftermarket audio system in there and CarPlay and just do it like there's enough of the aftermarket between gauges and everything else so you can just
Well, then you've
do it
pretty
that way.
much built a new car, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, but YouTubers and hot rod builders and SEMA guys and they're all kind of doing that anyway. So what are you really starting with? And if you can get a Fisker and start cutting it apart for $10,000, $15,000, like who knows what it's worth right now?
Yeah, and there's the interiors. I mean, I still like. There's a lot of cool little details, like the taco trays, the whole California motor, all the windows come down. There's the solar roof. There's a lot of stuff in there. And again, they tried to get into the market at a price point where people, where it was more mass market. There was always the intention to be like 40, $50,000, which is where Model 3 is. But that's super difficult. The whole thing is so hard. And there was an opportunity. There was a period in time, a bit like, we'll almost look back at this as the dot-com bubble, wasn't there? There was a period in time where if you were an EV startup, people just lined up to throw money at you.
Yeah.
And Fisker were able to ride that wave. So were a few others, Faraday and Future. There's a few that kind of rode that wave, and that money no longer really exists. So yeah, sadly, bye bye Fisker. But
All right, I was gonna say, let's take a quick break and talk about the more fun car that just got debuted because I'm sure everyone's lining up to get one of these. We'll be right back. All right, we have to talk about the Bugatti.
we do.
I mean, car's gorgeous and probably one of the coolest interior gauge clusters displays I've ever seen. And I know we're getting videos that are all they're CGI versions of it, but what a cool piece, right?
So the risk of being a bit lucky at us, we've had a viral hit over the weekend. We did a little, it's actually using a lot of press imagery, but we did like a cool little Instagram, vertical video montage.
Yeah, here you go. This is
Um, there you go. You can actually see if you're looking on YouTube. And Ryan Gregor, who works on our social team, did a fantastic job putting this together. He came to me and said, I've got this idea, a bit of an experiment. Let's give it a go. Anyway, over the weekend, it's got, last time I looked, it was 7.9 million views on Instagram and about 3.7 million views on TikTok.
yeah.
So pretty amazing score. And it's a Bugatti, but it's just, and you can say, oh, well, it's 4.1 million, there's 250 made,
And
but
they're
it's
sold.
rare, and they're sold. But you look at this, and this is one of those times you're just going to think, this just looks so well executed. It's
The video
beautiful.
of that gauge cluster and the way that movement is, and you play it with the sound. that's a great piece of media to tease with. Like for them to release that was such a smart idea.
And you look at that, and it just there's a reason like you and I got into this job, isn't it? You know, stuff like that. It's and it sort of transcends the automotive space into kind of the art world and the luxury goods world and everything else. And it's it's a hell of a thing. There's some of the Bugattis I was less, you know, some of the sort of remade Bugattis a bit, but this one just looks. I think it looks sensational. It's everything a Bugatti should be. If you go back to the 30s, you know, the Atlantique and all that sort of stuff, they were always, you know, objects of art that cost a fortune. And, you know, this, yeah, it's stunning. And it's got 1800 horsepower, which is always
Yeah,
good too.
so here's the big thing is it's a hybrid, but it's got 1,000 horsepower V16 engine, but a naturally aspirated engine. The Chiron is what, like 1,000 horsepower with a bunch of turbos on it. They made
Yeah.
1,000 horsepower engine and then mated it with, what is it, 3 electric motors for another 800 horsepower. So 1,800 horsepower.
And
And
that's actually what I like about this is what's really clever about it is by using three electric motors, you get rid of the need for turbos or superchargers, because turbos and
exactly.
superchargers are also about giving you loads of torque. But if you've got electric motors, you don't need, they do the torque bit. So what you can have is like an awesome sounding, naturally aspirated engine with all the everything that comes with it, because your electric motors are giving you the torque.
Right. Now
So
it fills in that low end, that turbo lag, right? Like,
yeah,
and we've talked about this before. Like, McLaren does a little bit of this with the turbos now. They go for a higher RPM engine that doesn't really, a little bit smaller displacement. So they miss a little bit of that low end torque, but now they can do that. Like they did it with P1, and the new one, the Artura, I imagine has that sort of same theme going on with filling in that low end torque, that turbo lag as well.
but having said that, when we talk about like hasn't got much torque, it's still got what 664 pounds-feet. So 1,000 horsepower, 664 pounds-feet of torque. So it's not, you know, it's not
Right. At what
bereft
RPM
of
though?
pull, but
You know,
probably high-ish.
yeah, probably highest because they made
But
a 9,000 RPM V16 engine.
but it has got 8.3 liters, so it's not like it's a kind of tiny little screamer. It's got 8.3 liters. It's an 8.3 liter V16. I mean, the whole thing is wonderfully excessive. What are they saying? Like naught to what's the other thing you got?
0
It
to
to
60
zero.
in two seconds.
Yeah, I mean most of that's traction. We've seen that with EVs, but the bit that I kind of love is 0 to 248 miles an hour in under 25 seconds. 0 to 124 in less than 5. That's insane. When I think about like what a really fast car is that 0 to 124 miles an hour in less than 5 seconds.
Most fast cars today struggle to go under 5 seconds, 0 to 60.
Yeah,
You
I mean
know, I mean,
most
we
of
have a lot
your
of good sports cars and stuff now that are getting
yeah
it done, and EVs that are getting it done. Uh,
yeah.
but, you know, it, when was, you know, it seemed like not that long ago, you know, Ferraris and Porsches were doing 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, probably in the
Well,
80s,
my
but
well, my 1997 911 was 4.9 to 60. Yeah, and that's 0 to 100, 124.
yeah. Now, the interior of this thing is fantastic. Now, of course, they released images with just, you know, I imagine some sort of CGI image, but uh
No, it's a real thing actually, Matt. I think that's a real. I mean, it's been
that the
cleaned
photo
up, but it's
is
a
yeah, so the animated version maybe is
yeah.
CGI, or but the photos are great. The color combination for the press vehicle is cool. And they did this great thing where uh there is a screen, and it comes up vertical out of the dash and then tilts sideways to become horizontal if you do want a screen, and or when you're driving you want an infotainment system other than
Yeah.
like steering wheel controls or whatever for volume and stuff, or
And it does
within
Apple
your
CarPlay.
CarPlay. Yeah. But the way it goes into the dash to keep it clean looking and not dated, right? Because the big screen is what gets dated in any new vehicle. Uh, they're making it timeless between the gauges and the switch gear and the hidden screen. I think is fantastic.
It's beautiful. I think the danger with anything like this, where it's, 4 million, was it $4.1 million, is it just becomes, you know, ostentatious. But this looks beautiful,
Yeah.
like a proper piece of couture. And I go, we go to Pebble Beach and we'll see all sorts of like multi-million-dollar creations, and they always just look a bit like they didn't know when to stop. But this thing seems beautifully
The
considered. So
the only thing that bugs me on these crazy supercars is everything is so expensive. It breaks and crack a windshield or, nick the paint, replace the battery. It's just like just crazy, crazy prices. And the handful of people that get to own these cars, when you talk to them, all they do is complain about that stuff. And my thought is, you're already paying $4.1 million. Why not Bugatti to just go, it's $4.3 million and everything is covered for 10 years, right? Just pay it upfront because someone goes, oh, it's a $4.3 million Bugatti. Yeah. Are you going to drive it? It's pretty expensive to drive. Okay, but it's covered for 10 years now. You paid 4.3 instead of 4.1. You prepaid. So now drive it and have some fun with it. And Bugatti will replace the rotors or the
yeah.
tires or the windshield if it cracks, or top off the fluid, or or if you leave it in your garage and the battery dies, they'll come and replace the battery because you paid them an extra $200,000. Like, in my mind, I think that's how they should sell it.
But maybe you're thinking about it like as a guy who hasn't got like 100 million in the bank. Because if you've got one of these, you've probably got a fairly epic car collection, and you've probably got full-time staff looking after them.
Yes, but I remember Craig Jackson from Barrett Jackson, and he bought a Veyron at his auction. Something happened in the auction. I don't remember what, but he was a stand-up guy. So somebody had bid on the car, and then um like during the commercial break, they figured out like he was like a new bidder, and I don't know, wasn't completely truthful on his financial position. So when they came back from commercial break, Craig Jackson was like on the air, and I'm paraphrasing this whole thing, but something to along the lines of him going, there was an issue with that. So, but we ended the auction and it's only fair to the buyer. He goes, so I'm just going to buy it for the price that we just all agreed on. And he bought himself a Veyron, and he drove it from Arizona to our studio here in California. And he was talking about, he's like, man, I got this Veyron. He goes, but the previous owner had driven it actually quite a bit, was going from California to Vegas a couple times. And he goes, it just nicks in the paint and the windshield and stuff. He goes, like a rock hit the emblem on the front of the car. And he's like, that was the last straw. He's like, when that thing was like, I don't know what it was, like $1,700,
Yeah.
he's like, I already did the windshield on this car and touched up some of the paint. He goes, I didn't even bother replacing the thing on that, just the front emblem, because it was so much money to do. I mean, certainly you're right. If you're, you're worth hundreds of millions, you buy this car and you do want to put it on the road, I'm sure it's going to get a full PPF wrap and, and whatever. You're going to have an $8,000 paint protection program going on between that and the ceramic and whatever on this. Do the front windshield, just do it all. But
It's
yeah, anyway,
oh,
my thought has always been should be free maintenance. But
do you know what I was really? It used to say I was looking at. Um, I was looking at I bring a trailer over the weekend, and I saw some F430 Ferrari, which is a Ferrari I always enjoyed, and they're about 100 grand. So in the general scheme of
yeah,
Ferraris, they're one of the more affordable ones. And there was an advert. I was like, wow, that's only going for like 100 grand. I thought there'd be a bit more than that. And then I read the narrative, and it said, hey, great buy, because had a $16,000 service done in April. I was like, that's why it's 100 grand. Because it was like, okay, what's a 16 grand service on an F430? I think it's like the clutch or something. But that's the
yeah.
problem, isn't it? Like, that's also why even things like F355s aren't as expensive as they might be, because they're so expensive to run.
That's
But yeah, like,
you and I have talked about this off the air, going, hey, there's a couple of affordable Ferraris out there. I
Yeah.
mean, within reason, sub 100 grand Ferraris. But you're like, but what does it cost to own that car?
I mean, we've seen it. Obviously, we're running like privately. I have an old 911, which doesn't cost me a lot of money to run every year because there's so many aftermarket parts. You don't have to buy
Yeah.
Porsche specific for like a little rubber seal or something, just because they made so many of them. But then all the other cars that we have on the Edmunds fleet, you realize like the Corvette was great, but if you wanted to take it to track, you had to do XYZ, and that was like $1,500. And then what about the brakes? What about the tires? And this is the challenge. And
Yeah.
but the Bugatti, I think, is an entirely different. That's an entirely different world, and it also has we forgot to mention that the steering wheel hub is fixed, so it's a bit like an old Citroen.
Yeah.
It's also to where like the wheel itself remains static, the hub remains static, and you can turn around it. It's it's going to be at Monterey now. I can't wait to see it, and I haven't seen it in real life yet. It's going to be at Monterey, I'm sure.
I'm
So
sure it will be. Yeah. Are you gonna go? You're gonna go.
yeah, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna go up there. I'm gonna go up there. Adam put out on Twitter, Adam Kroll, he's gonna go. We're gonna race. He's gonna race his BRE Datsun. So we'll be at the track in the little
Oh,
roadster.
nice.
Yeah, the Datsun Roadster, the first BRE Roadster.
Can you
So
bring that chef friend of yours again? Because that beef was incredible last
that
time.
was, yeah, that is the plan. If he flies down, I think he's in like Seattle or Portland or something like that. But yeah, he's come down for a few years and he cooks up for everybody. Comes by the house and cooks, and comes to the track and cooks and does an amazing, amazing job.
Everybody needs a friend who's a chef.
Yeah, Dan Wood is his name. He's great. Yeah, that's the best event for it too. Um, all right. Oh, what else is going on? Are we missing anything else? What do you guys got in the works?
We also did we've done a little if you head to our YouTube channel, Emmy Hall did a nice little film for us on I'm just going to bring it up now so I can give you the exact title, but basically taking the mid-sized trucks off-road. So this is Tacoma TRD off-road, Ranger FX4, Colorado Z71. So we've done some of this stuff on the road with these trucks, but we actually went and did some mud plugging. We also have just done a roundup video of all the 9 different electric cars, trucks, and SUVs we actually own. So we certainly included the Fisker in there, the Blazer, which obviously had a fairly storied past, but is working now. Lightning, i5, Mustang Mach-E, Rivian. We've recorded it just before we got the Cybertruck. So yeah, lots of good stuff going on and things. Also quite a few little announcements coming. You mentioned at the top of the show that we're starting to see more stuff coming out. Goodwood's coming up in a few weeks' time in the UK. There's a new BMW M5. I think it's going to be unveiled at Goodwood. And then there'll be more around Car Week here. The cadence of auto shows doesn't really exist anymore, but these
Right.
sort of signature events, particularly in the more luxury market, these signature events around Goodwood and then Pebble Beach in America are starting to create more and more news, which is great to see. We're off to drive the new 911. There's a lot going on this year. I had to work it out for insurance purposes. We are doing over 50 trips to Europe to drive vehicles or attend things this year.
Yeah,
Absolutely insane.
I was just talking to a car company over the weekend, one of their PR people, and they said something like 20 vehicles being announced over like the next year-ish. Uh, and it's going to be an exciting time for them, but they haven't announced it yet, so I can't really say who it is. But it was fun to catch up with them and kind of hear what the plan was. They couldn't tell me anything more than the number of vehicles.
There's a lot of people in that. I mean, Porsche is pretty much updating their whole range this year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people launching a lot of cars and having a really busy time. It's an exciting time to be part of the industry. It really is. There's all this technology
Yep.
stuff, but there's a whole, who knows what will happen politically as well. So yeah, interesting times, and we're absolutely flat out.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap things up. Of course, go to Edmunds.com, and Edmunds.com/news is where you catch up on a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about here. We appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. Send it to a friend. Give us a nice little review. We've been at this for a little while this year now. Alistair and I doing this version. So if you like it, please let us know. And yeah, until next time, keep the air and the spare in the bag and the wheel.